It all starts with the regretful MC admitting to himself that he should never have listened to that awful guy. A man in a suit assures him not to overthink things and just sign the document. Holding the pen, the young man hesitates as he remembers how he got into this situation. His fake high school friend slammed the table, acting offended that he would doubt such a safe investment. With a lot of smooth talking, the guy in the suit guaranteed that the compound interest system was completely foolproof. Pushing the paperwork forward, he promised that any money placed there would easily double. He even used the MC's grief, calling during his father's memorial service to fake concern. The scammer said it broke his heart to see his friend suffering and bowing to his boss. In that fragile time, the young man believed the good intentions in front of him were genuine. Seeing no other way out to improve his life, he ended up signing the contract. Right then, the fake friend reveals his true colors, laughing at having fooled a complete idiot. 2 years pass until the current moment, with the young man coming home feeling incredibly sick. Desperate, he rushes to the bathroom and ends up throwing up everything in his stomach. The young man laments his own luck, realizing he threw away the one snack he managed to buy. As a 28-year-old man, he is bitter about a life that comes nowhere near what he had planned. To make matters worse, the scumbag who caused all of this vanished 1 year ago, leaving behind only unpayable debts. With just a few hours left before his part-time job, the young man decides to read a little before going to sleep. Grabbing his favorite book, he treats himself to 30 minutes with the one hobby in his miserable life. He has already read that same story hundreds of times, but he feels the work always brings a fresh charm. Even amidst so much misfortune, he is thankful to have this little escape from reality memorized in his head. Suddenly, something strange catches his attention. He is completely confused when small black feathers start floating around his room. He watches the dark objects falling around him in deep confusion. Before he could process the scene, a violent cough hits him and blood runs from his mouth. Completely dazed, he stains the pages of the book as he tries to support himself on the table. A sharp pain strikes his chest, making him grab his shirt in despair. Unable to catch his breath, he falls to the floor, suffocating next to the book that now glows with a purple aura. The young man curses his own life as he loses the strength to get up. Bleeding on the bedroom floor, he wonders if his end would arrive in such a useless way. Just as he began to accept his fate, he feels a strange energy boiling inside his own body. The last thing that comes to his mind before blacking out is the face of that jerk who tricked him. His body is left lying on the bedroom floor, surrounded by dozens of mysterious feathers. Right then, a system panel appears in the darkness, announcing a mission and a special reward. With a jolt, he catches his breath and wakes up startled in a completely different place. Still panting on the bed, the young man wonders if all that suffering was just a nightmare. His eyes widen as he notices the details around him. The environment looks nothing like his old, cramped room. Walking around the massive and luxurious place, he tries to figure out where on earth he ended up. A shiver runs down his spine when he notices something moving outside. On the balcony, a huge red-eyed crow stares at him in a sinister way in the dead of night. As soon as he approaches the glass, the animal takes flight and vanishes into the darkness. The flapping of wings leaves the young man even more intrigued by the situation. The bird flies toward the night sky, revealing a completely surreal landscape. The MC freezes when he looks up and cannot believe what he sees. 3 moons of different colors light up the city, making him immediately suspect where he is. Staring at his own reflection in the window, he recognizes the face that replaced his old appearance. It all clicks as soon as a girl knocks on the door calling for Prince Ran Aberin. Panicking at the sudden voice, he asks the woman to wait and not enter the room. He trips over his own feet and ends up falling face first onto the wooden floor. Groaning in pain, the young man holds his head while trying to gather his thoughts. From the outside, the maid gets the message and lets him know she will return later. Sitting on the floor with his suspicions confirmed, he realizes he truly transmigrated into his favorite book. The problem is that the occupied body belongs to the 7th prince of that empire. This character has a tragic destiny and is fated to meet a miserable end right at the beginning of the story. The MC despairs, lamenting having woken up in the skin of a doomed background character. Before he could think any further, a deep voice echoes from the door announcing Sane's arrival. Immediately the young man freezes, knowing full well that this is the 7th prince's advisor. The old man enters the room accompanied by a maid and justifies the visit with the prince's absence at dinner. Showing concern, the advisor asks if he is feeling better and mentions he prepared a simple meal. Sweating cold, the young man decides to stay calm and pretend he is the real Aberin so as not to raise suspicions. Trying to sound natural, he nods and says he is already feeling much better. Satisfied, the old man orders the maid to set the table for a late-night snack. The MC thanks him for the food, but notices the girl is shaking a lot and the dish looks like dog food. To ease the tension, he tries to grab the teapot himself to pour some tea. The simple gesture causes genuine terror in the young woman, who gets startled by his approach. She knocks the drink over on the table and goes into a state of absolute shock. The girl throws herself on the floor, crying desperately and begging for forgiveness for her mistake. The young man does not understand the reason for so much drama over a little accident. However, he quickly remembers the terrible reputation of the owner of that body. The real Aberon was trash who destroyed everything and even got rid of his own servants when he got angry. Apparently, he inherited the reputation of the worst villain in the early parts of the novel. Breaking the tense mood, the advisor apologizes for the inconvenience and says he is relieved by the prince's health. Right after, the old man pushes a document onto the table demanding that he sign the budget proposal. The MC grabs the quill with disdain, knowing an incompetent prince would have no important business to handle. He realizes right away that the advisor forged the papers to embezzle all the funds that belonged to him. The MC concludes that a mere assistant can only go so far because he is a relative of the Empress, an absurdly powerful woman who has great influence over that world. Holding the pen, he hesitates on whether he should sign to avoid straying from the original story, since the body's true owner was a complete idiot. Sane loses his patience and mocks him to his face, asking if he forgot how to sign his name and saying it is getting embarrassing for a prince. Being mocked so openly, the young man regrets that out of everyone, he had to reincarnate into a garbage character. Feigning pity, the old man claims that this is exactly why the boy needs him, telling him to just sign everything without overthinking. The young man stays silent for a moment, just staring at the paper in front of him. With a dark look, the advisor insists on the order to get the signature done once and for all. Gripping the pen tightly, the prince gets irritated seeing that this humiliation is exactly like his past life. Overcome with revolt, he decides there is no way he will keep living in such a pathetic manner. Staring down the old man, he points out that the math does not make sense and questions if this isn't clear embezzlement. The assistant shows surprise seeing the boy actually thinking, admitting he misjudged him. Maintaining an arrogant posture, the man warns that the food will get cold and promises to review the documents if the signature is done first. Grabbing the teapot disrespectfully, the old man tells him to stop thinking and just sign the paperwork. At that, the maid shrinks back in fear at the sudden movement. The MC throws the cup right at the advisor's face, breaking the porcelain and spilling the liquid everywhere. With the table all messy, the MC apologizes sarcastically saying his hand slipped, confident in the information he read in the work. The old man gets furious with tea dripping down his face and questions the attitude, but the boy knows very well that the Empress does not even remember this advisor exists. Wasting no time, the prince grabs the entire stack of forged documents and throws them hard. The paperwork hits the assistant square in the chest, scattering pages all over the room. Leaning back in his chair, the young man warns that the old guy must take responsibility for the mess, as he has no intention of having a tragic fate like the original character. Refusing the role of a loser from his past life, he swears to use all his knowledge of the book and the power of that body to turn the tables. The advisor glares at him with hatred, while the young man calmly asks why he is still standing there. Pointing disdainfully at the living room floor, he mentions that the rug got stained with tea. Giving off an intimidating aura, the boy orders him to clean up the mess immediately, focused solely on his own survival. In that world, the imperial family is seen as untouchable deities, where everything and everyone exists purely to serve them. These nobles possess special abilities and long blonde hair, representing the ultimate symbol of beauty and unquestionable power. However, the assistant foams at the mouth with anger, thinking that the seventh prince is the only flaw in this perfect system. The man refuses to accept a dumb, hot-tempered kid with black hair as royalty. Consumed by frustration, he regrets having spent rivers of money on bribes just to work for a failed piece of trash. The advisor stammers in anger, looking at the mess on the rug, unable to fight back against the order. Swallowing his pride, the old man kneels down to scrub the floor, cursing the situation, before announcing he finished the job. Upset by the humiliation, he stands up abruptly and announces he is leaving the room. At that moment, a knife is thrown, sticking right at the man's feet, while the prince says he took way too long on such a simple task. With a threatening look, the MC demands that the assistant clean it all over again, only much faster. Sweating cold at the change in attitude, the old man tries to use the Empress's name again to protect himself. The young man sees right through the bluff, deciding that the punishment was not enough to put that parasite in his proper place. Turning his attention back to the maid shaking in the corner, the prince orders her to cover her ears immediately. Scaring the girl even more, he warns that the matter is not for her to hear, threatening to remove her fingers if she pays attention. In absolute panic, the young woman covers her ears as hard as she can. With the coast clear, the young man begins to reveal heavy secrets directly to the corrupt advisor. Hearing the boy's words, the man's face completely freezes in shock. The assistant turns bizarrely pale, looking like he just came face to face with his own doom. Sometime later, the maids are washing clothes in the courtyard, and gossip that the seventh prince has been acting very weird lately. Anna agrees, terrified, mentioning that the boss has gotten much scarier and fearing for their own safety. Another employee tries to ease the tension, pointing out that at least the boy has not left the palace anymore. In the middle of the gossip, little Anna jumps up remembering she was supposed to be cleaning somewhere else. Inside the grand palace library, the sunlight illuminates the perfectly organized bookshelves. Enjoying the mood, the prince comments that the servants avoid him out of pure fear of his purposely cruel actions. He celebrates the corrupt advisor's disappearance, thinking it is great not having to break any more teapots over anyone's head. Sipping a quiet tea, the young man relaxes knowing he still has an entire year of peace before the original plot begins. His mind wanders back to the day he found that worn-out book in a library, remembering how much he loved the story. Standing in the luxurious hall, he decides the best thing to do is enjoy his free time with elegance until the main character shows up. Looking at the clear sky through the window, the boy even jokes that it would be cool to have wings to fly and admire that view from above. Suddenly, a shockwave hits his body and red marks begin to glow across his face. The teacup slips from his hands and shatters into pieces on the wooden floor. The young man collapses to his knees, grabbing his own chest, feeling his insides catch fire. Panting, he realizes this mysterious agony is something completely out of reality. From outside, the maid knocks on the door asking for permission to clean, while he mentally begs for help. The girl sneaks into the dark room and breathes a sigh of relief, not finding her monster of a boss in there. However, she soon notices the shattered dishes on the floor and gets confused by the strange scene. Crouched down gathering the shards, the young woman cries over the material loss, calculating that the value of those dishes would feed her family for 1 month. Suddenly, a weird flapping noise catches the cleaner's attention. A huge red-eyed crow comes out from behind the furniture, making a lot of noise. The bizarre animal just stands there in the middle of the library staring at the girl. Hugging her broom, the maid warns the bird to run away, because the owner of that room is a terribly mean man. The crow caws desperately, as the MC's consciousness goes into shock upon noticing his own body turned into a bird. Flapping his wings clumsily around the hall, he wonders what kind of magical madness just happened. The girl warns that they will both be finished if the prince arrives, making the young man realize she is trying to kick out her own boss. Grabbing the critter with her hands, she pushes it toward the open window, while he mentally screams, giving orders not to be let go. Ignoring the cause, the maid throws the bird out the window of the tallest tower in the palace. Free-falling toward the stone ground below, the crow despairs at the impending doom. The MC tries to think fast about how to save himself, concluding that the obvious thing to do would be to flap his wings. Focused on surviving at any cost, the bird widens its red eyes and forces itself to react. Plummeting at high speed, the boy prays with all his might to manage a glide. A miracle happens and the feathers catch the wind, leaving the bird completely confused by his own ability. Flying through the skies, the boy celebrates the success and soon wonders if he could turn back into a human. Flying over the massive castle, he decides to test the new skill in the dead of night. Back in his room, the young man pants heavily and is thankful he managed to return to normal after trying a few times. Catching his breath, he reflects in shock on the power to transform just by using sheer willpower. The problem is that a bizarre ability like this was never mentioned in the original story. Faced with this, he decides to keep the transformation an absolute secret so as not to cause trouble. After all, any sudden change could end up ruining the course of events in the book. Right then, a servant knocks on the door letting him know the night ritual is about to start, and he needs to get ready. Adjusting his clothes, the MC realizes the big day has finally arrived. In this world, the emperor and his children gather every month for a ritual that serves as a true succession test. As expected, the seventh prince sits isolated at the end of the table, finding the whole thing very surreal in person. Observing his blonde siblings, he notices how his own look clashes completely with that dazzling royalty. Suddenly, the eighth prince glares at the boy with deep contempt, outraged to see a nobody holding his head high. The arrogant brat starts teasing, asking if the trash lost the ability to understand words. Not giving a single care about a background character, the young man just ignores the insult, which leaves his half-brother fuming with hate. Cutting the tense mood, the first princess scolds his attitude, demanding proper posture in front of the emperor. Analyzing the table, the MC quickly understands that everyone there is seated in order of power. Those nobles are born with manis, a magical energy measured by the brightness of their blonde hair. Since the previous owner of the body had black hair, he had absolutely no power, and that was why he was so resentful. The hall falls dead silent when heavy footsteps echo through the room. The top of the hierarchy finally shows up, commanding immediate respect from everyone present. Walking with authority, the powerful emperor holds glory and ruin in the palms of his hands. Without any delay, the sovereign sets the pace and orders the ritual to begin at once. The man reaches out to a dark blue stone tablet, an ancient relic from the First Empire. As soon as his energy makes contact, the artifact reacts intensely to measure the user's power. An absurd pillar of light bursts into the room, showing the ruler's overwhelming strength. The brightness travels all across the table, leaving the boy shocked by such raw power. Taking his hand off the stone, the emperor calls upon the children who wish to test their strength. Keeping a low profile, the seventh prince just watches the situation unfold. Without hesitation, the first prince steps forward and announces he will make his attempt. Since the rankings rarely change, the MC remembers that only the main heir usually participates. The blonde noble touches the relic, focused on showing everyone the magnitude of his magical power. He does this to reaffirm his absolute dominance and make it clear who the future king will be. However, a sharp pain strikes the noble's body in a totally unexpected way. The heir collapses and coughs up an absurd amount of blood. Panic takes over the hall, with servants screaming desperately for a doctor. Amidst all that confusion, the reincarnated young man is the only one who stays calm, already knowing what was going down. From the book's story, he knows perfectly well that the man is going to meet a grim fate coughing up blood. With this tragic event, the main plot of the novel officially kicks off. Manny's energy is a special bloodline gift, but it manifests in different ways for each person. While one brother controls fire, the collapsing heir is a water element user. Emitting the blue light across the table, it becomes clear that the heir only has enough range to cover half the distance. Falling to the floor bloody, the tragedy follows its natural course under the frightened screams of the court. The young man recalls that the true protagonist of the story will only show up long after this incident. Facing the situation, he wonders again how on earth he gained the power to turn into a crow being magicless. With his mind racing, the boy suspects that gaining strength right on the day of the incident is no mere coincidence. Later in the sick man's room, a dagger grazes past the heir's face and sticks into the wall. The blonde mocks the visit, saying he thought it was an assassin, but it was just his useless brother. Unfazed, the MC warns that if it were an execution, the target would already be gone without even noticing. Sweating cold, the sick man realizes how absurd it is for someone to break into the safest place in the empire without leaving a trace. Irritated by his own weakness, the man punches the furniture, cursing his current situation. He cannot accept it, remembering that his body was in perfect condition until the morning before. Pushing his limits, the noble tries to manifest his magical aura one more time. The effort backfires, causing a coughing fit and extreme chest pains. The blonde panics as he feels his insides burning, fearing he has lost his powers forever. Stumbling around the room, he refuses to accept such a pathetic fate for a future ruler. The heir grabs his hookah mouthpiece tightly, assuring himself that he is superior to all the others. Sitting calmly in the armchair, the boy advises his brother to drop the smoke if he wants to keep breathing. The sick man is startled by the sudden voice and demands to know what kind of trick he used to get in there. Acting as natural as possible, the young man explains he simply scaled the wall from the outside. The man points at the massive tower in the window, thinking it is impossible for anyone to climb that. Ignoring the disbelief, the visitor focuses on what matters and points out that the royal doctors have not figured out the cause of the illness. The heir shows blind confidence, seeming to have reached a brilliant conclusion in his own head. He laughs hysterically in the middle of the room, acting completely arrogant. The MC remains composed, realizing his older brother has finally started thinking. The blonde points his finger, accusing the boy of poisoning him just to use him as a bargaining chip in the future. Sure of his own genius, the man mocks the plan, claiming his little brother made a huge mistake. Cutting the delusion short, the young man warns in a cold tone that in 1 week, the sick man will wish for his own demise. The heir's arrogance vanishes instantly upon hearing the grim prediction. Adjusting his posture in the chair, the MC guarantees he is not behind any poisoning scheme. Being completely honest, he confesses he does not know who the culprit is, but reaffirms the end will be an agonizing fate. Maintaining his chill, the invader imposes his presence and demands full attention for his next words. The blonde freezes in terror, being warned that this is his one and only chance at survival. Later, the seventh prince flies freely in his crow form, relieved to have dealt with such a cowardly guy. Safe back in his room, the young man sits on the floor exhausted, pleased to have secured a powerful pawn for his game. Flying through the darkened night, the MC realizes how convenient this crow transformation ability really is. Besides, the bird form allows him to travel discreetly to places much further away than he had imagined. Enjoying the freedom in the air, the boy decides to explore the area a bit more before heading back. Already morning in the massive palace, he scratches his head trying to think of what he should do to fix his current situation. Outside the room, a maid hesitates at the door, worried because the boss has not eaten anything in 2 whole days. Panic takes over the girl as she imagines something terrible might have happened, remembering the penalty for that is the ultimate price. Desperate, she pounds on the wooden door, calling for the prince as loud as she can. Right then, the MC swings the door open and asks the reason for all the screaming so early in the day. Getting a huge scare, the servant trips over her own feet and collapses on the hallway floor. The tray flies far, spilling the whole meal and messing up the floor near the young man's feet. Staring at the mess, the young man lets out a heavy sigh at yet another useless problem to deal with. Crying in despair, the woman kneels down begging for forgiveness for a crime she herself deems worthy of the highest penalty. Shaking with terror, she tries to explain she only wanted to check on his health, cursing her own clumsiness. The prince asks coldly how she intends to pay for dirtying his shoes, while the girl pleads for her family's safety. Cutting the drama, he tells her to forget about it and just clean everything in 5 minutes before getting out of his sight. With the servant hurrying away, the boy forbids anyone from entering his quarters without a direct order. 1 whole month has passed since the first prince fell ill and coughed up blood in the middle of the ritual. During this time, a dangerous rumor started circulating quietly through the palace hallways. The gossip said the heir had lost his powers, creating the perfect chance for the other siblings to strike. To silence the doubts, the sick man begged the emperor to move up the famous hunting competition. Riding peacefully, the MC notes with relief that events keep following the book's storyline. A massive crowd gathers at the forest entrance to honor the grand tournament that is about to begin. Suddenly, an arrogant noble yells out, calling the boy an insect just to grab attention. The guy approaches riding a white horse, teasing and saying a dark mount suits a loser. Having no patience for childish fights, the young man simply ignores the insult and keeps riding as if nothing happened. Leaving the annoyed provocateur behind, he admits to himself that he vastly prefers his black horse. Finally arriving at the meeting point, the young man spots the massive structure planted in the middle of the camp. The spot marks the exact entrance to the dreaded imperial forest, where wild beasts await the competitors. Right in the center sits the Tower of Beginnings, the sacred monument where the opening ritual always takes place every year. Dismounting elegantly, the young man waits for the heir to finish the ceremony so the hunt can officially kick off. Sitting on his throne, the emperor orders his son to start the presentation, reminding him that this is a cruel political game. Keeping his superior pose, the first prince agrees and walks to the center of the stage. One of his brothers approaches with a fake smile, celebrating his good health and asking what his victory wish will be. With disdain, the noble replies that he will obviously come out the winner and dismisses the cheap flattery. Walking toward the relic, he gets ready to show off his magical energy in front of all the guests. In the audience, the participants gossip about the sickness rumors, being quickly scolded to stay quiet. Overcome with nerves, the heir swallows hard and prays that his useless brother's tips actually work. Watching from afar, the MC keeps a relaxed posture waiting to see the result of his plan. The candidate channels his magic with hatred, swearing to eliminate the boy in the worst way possible if this is a trap. With an analytical look, the young man notes how the noble is completely stiff from all the built-up tension. However, he knows that if the deal was followed to the letter, the spectacle will be quite something to see. Right then, a colossal explosion of blue energy erupts from the firstborn's body, lighting up the entire camp. The magical power expands like a furious hurricane, covering the sky and surprising the huge crowd. Wind currents slice through the air violently, showing a strength much greater than anyone expected. The nobles panic and cover themselves with their arms to avoid being swallowed by the massive vortex. While the gale drags everything in its path, the 7th prince does not move a muscle amidst the chaos. Fueled by the euphoria of his restored power, the first prince screams his own name at the top of his lungs for all to hear. Overflowing with arrogance, he reaffirms his position of absolute authority over the crown's other heirs. Holding nothing back, the man declares himself the only one with the absolute right to sit on the empire's throne. The energy condenses rapidly, taking the terrifying shape of a massive beast made of pure water. The magical creature roars toward the clouds, showing the true extent of the warrior's absurd strength. The impact of the strike tears the night sky apart, creating an impressive flash that can be seen from miles away. The crowd falls dead silent, completely hypnotized by the overwhelming display. An old knight watches the scene in awe, realizing this is the true power of the imperial family. Soon after, the applause erupts, while the rival brother clenches his fists frustrated at having his plans ruined. The MC's mind drifts to their deal, where he handed over a mysterious stone demanding the sick man deposit his magic into it. The exotic object serves exactly to drain lethal impurities, being the only salvation for that illness. Facing his brother's resistance, the boy warned coldly he was not going to beg to save a stubborn fool's life. Back in the present, the young man concludes that the final artifact solved the problem and bought him valuable time. Interrupting his thoughts, an exhausted lackey approaches carrying a heavy sack on his back. Hunched over from exhaustion, the servant hands over the luggage as ordered, while the prince questions the exaggerated delay. In a threatening tone, the MC scolds the man's incompetence for failing to complete such a basic task. Desperate, the lackey tries to figure out how the boy tamed the wild horse he had sent specifically to hurt him. At that moment, the deep sound of war horns echoes across the massive gathering field. Imposing on his throne, the emperor raises his hand, drawing the attention of all participants. With a commanding shout, the race begins, and the massive cavalry charges furiously toward the trees. While the crowd tramples over each other at the entrance, the boy drops the ridiculous idea of trying to win the tournament just for a wish. Keeping a steady pace on his mount, he prefers to stay out of the spotlight and act from the shadows in this competition. His true goal in there is to track down and find the former commander of the Imperial Knights. Far away, the old warrior's assistant comments, in fascination, that the prince's power seemed like the work of a god. However, the veteran analyzes the situation coldly, suspecting the emperor did that just to break the noble's spirits. Terrified by the treason in those words, the helper begs the master to keep those dangerous thoughts to himself. Showing confidence, the commander assures him his long life experience has taught him very well when and where to speak. Oblivious to the conversation, the boy heads into the dense forest that acts as the stage for the bloody imperial tradition. To succeed, he needs to cross the easiest map areas and reach the giant beast zone deep in the woods. Recalling the book's details, the MC knows the former commander presented a golden fox to the emperor. The problem is the work never revealed the exact location. For that exact reason, he spent the last few days exploring the forest in crow form to try and track the animal's habitat. Holding the reins tight, the young man calculates the target must be near the southwest lake, since the warrior washed his hands right after the hunt. The plan is to get there before the old man and wait for the perfect moment to strike. Right then, he even notes that the horse seems to understand everything he says. Looking back, the prince feels a huge relief having managed to bring that heavy luggage, focused on delivering it all to Duke Agony Fetus. Suddenly, the mount gets spooked and neighs loudly, stopping in the middle of the trail. The animal rears up abruptly, catching the rider totally off guard. From the shock, the heavy hooves skid hard across the forest grass. Trying to regain control, the young man asks, completely confused, why the ride stopped out of nowhere and if the beast got sick. The beast just shakes its head no. With that, the boy suspects some monster might be roaming the area. A much simpler idea pops into his head at that exact moment. Looking at the situation, he wonders if the whole problem is just the ridiculous amount of weight on its back. Losing his temper, the prince tells the mount to stop whining, reminding it that other horses pull wagons while it cries over a backpack. Overcome with annoyance, he threatens to have the stable master cut the animal's food if that stubborn arrogance keeps up. Miraculously, the horse gets the message and immediately breaks into a full sprint again. Far away, the riders push forward at a fast pace through a thick trail. Pressed for time, the young man notes that his situation is pretty complicated. In another part of the woods, the experienced Duke remarks that they should have hunted a wolf or deer by this time of day. Walking right behind with the supplies, the assistant tries to be optimistic, saying luck just isn't on their side. The old commander laments the weight of age, admitting he lived his whole life as a sword of the empire but cannot beat time. Trying to cheer the boss up, the helper asks him not to talk like that, praising that the veteran has already become a true living legend. The man makes sure to point out the countless military feats and monsters the former leader of the knights has taken down in the past. Changing the subject, the Duke points to the sunlight, asking if his partner has ever seen the imperial family up close. The servant says no. With a solemn tone, the old man guarantees everything makes sense when you stand face to face with those magnificent beings who rule the world. His mind travels to the past, remembering that his bloodline has protected those true gods for over 1,000 years. Inside a luxury carriage, he was instructing his own son about the massive pride in serving the imperial house with loyalty. Pointing out the window, the warrior showed the family's commercial guild responsible for supplying the royalty with goods. Suddenly, the smooth trip is cut short by a hard jolt to the vehicle's wheels. The driver panics and begs for forgiveness, warning that they ended up running over something in the middle of the street. Staying calm, the noble orders the boy to stay in the carriage, while he himself sorts out the mess outside. On the stone street, the lifeless body of a ragged child lies after the brutal hit. Blood flows, staining the cobblestones right next to the heavy wooden wheel. Showing no emotion, the warrior deduces it was just a homeless kid trying to steal the sacred temple's tributes. Staring at the tragedy, he tries to convince himself that this cruel scene is a very common sight in the capital. Curious about the stop, his son opens the carriage door wanting to know what happened in the street. Startled, the father yells, immediately demanding the heir not to step out of the vehicle under any circumstances. The man rushes to block the child's view, trying to protect the boy's innocence from that harsh reality. Swallowing his guilt, he lies saying absolutely nothing important happened there. Back in the present, the old man walks through the forest, remembering the victim was not even 10 years old. Reflecting on the fate of that body in the incinerator, he wonders how so much darkness can exist in such a beautiful empire. Interrupting his thoughts, the helper grumbles from exhaustion, reminding him they need to at least save the family's honor in the tournament. The ex-commander smiles confidently, mentioning he just so happens to know a spot around there where a golden fox usually shows up. Meanwhile, the MC runs frantically through the brush, carrying the giant backpack he took off the runaway horse. Stopping to catch his breath, he complains about not being able to use his crow form due to the luggage, afraid of losing sight of his target. Totally exhausted, the young man feels firsthand how dangerous that area of the forest can be for someone walking. A weird noise comes from the bushes just ahead, putting the boy on high alert. With no weapon to defend himself, he regrets his own laziness and thinks it would be a waste to drop the supplies to run away. As he plans to run in the opposite direction of the danger, an object flies through the air at high speed from far away. A massive rock hits a man passing by right in the face, splashing blood from the force of the impact. The prince freezes instantly, recognizing the victim's unmistakable hair color right away. Nearby, the old warrior's deep voice echoes, calling for his partner desperately to find out what that loud thud was. Sweating cold, the young man is certain that injured man is none other than the assistant to the noble he was hunting. The servant collapses on his back, completely knocked out by the brutal hit. Clinging to the backpack, the MC panics, knowing he just created a colossal problem at the worst possible time. Just up ahead, the former commander of the Imperial Knights draws his sword, showing the presence of a true war hero. Hiding in the shadows, the boy remembers that this veteran will be the future master of the novel's main protagonist. The original plan was simple and did not involve a direct, violent run-in with them in the middle of the woods. The idea was to wait at the Golden Fox's habitat and accuse the noble of trying to steal the royalty's prey. As punishment for the fake offense, he would force the old man to carry that bag full of heavy rocks for the rest of the competition. Grabbing his own hair, the MC despairs, seeing his perfect strategy crumble before his eyes. Analyzing the scene, the Duke concludes the projectile was too heavy and that someone definitely threw it on purpose. With his guard up, he strongly suspects a professional assassin was aiming for him and ended up missing the target. Lying in the grass, the assistant groans in pain and tries to call out for his master very weakly. The warrior kneels down quickly, asking his partner to share any detail he can recall about the sudden attack. Hiding, the boy freezes, thinking his awful reputation as the seventh prince would ruin him if the rumors reached the court. Shaking, the injured man starts pushing his memory to try and describe the madness he witnessed. Anxiety takes over the MC, who twists and turns trying to invent a miraculous way out of that disaster. Blood runs down the servant's face as he closes his eyes from exhaustion. To everyone's immediate relief, the man just apologizes and confesses he couldn't see who threw it. Understanding, the veteran accepts the answer, but soon turns his head sharply, noticing something weird. The old combatant's sharp instincts track the suspicious movement near the trees right away. Taking advantage of the tiny distraction, the reincarnated young man runs as fast as he can in silence. Gripping his sword, the commander sprints off, swearing to catch the criminal and drag him back. The crazy chase begins, tearing through the peace of the forest as their footsteps speed up. Panting, the prince feels his lungs burning, cursing the absurd weight of that backpack as he runs to save his own hide. Sweating cold from the pursuit, the prince calculates he has run far enough and that losing a man that age should be easy. But the ex-commander pushes forward, smashing everything with his sword, making the boy think it is crazy that veteran isn't retired. The old man demands the intruder reveal his identity and warns that no one escapes him, making the young man desperate as he gets closer. Running through the brush, the MC weighs whether to ditch the bag to turn into a crow, wishing he had his black horse. However, he quickly drops the transformation idea and focuses solely on trying to run away as fast as possible. Setting a crazy pace, the boy kicks up heavy dirt as he runs frantically through the dense woods. Right behind, the Duke is surprised to notice the target suddenly picked up speed, and his silhouette seems to have changed. Overcome with frustration, the warrior hacks at the bushes with his sword, thinking his own eyesight is failing due to old age. Reaching a clearing, the old veteran stops to catch his breath and wonders if he really ended up losing sight of the runaway. Just then, the prince feels his own body get light out of nowhere, and even suspects he turned into a crow again, but realizes he is still running. Suddenly, the loud sound of hooves echoes through the brush, making the young man wonder if his stubborn horse decided to come back. Analyzing the situation, the MC has a surprising suspicion about what just happened to him. Standing still among the trees, he is in absolute shock seeing that he took the form of a majestic black horse. Taking a few clumsy steps on the grass, the boy can barely believe this bizarre new ability. Far away, the first prince praises his brother and asks if he really managed to hunt down that impressive animal. Looking at the massive fallen monster, the heir questions the reason for so much surprise over the hunt's crushing result. The blonde declares the tournament victory belongs to his brother and already wants to know what request will be made to the emperor. With a dark look, the mysterious noble promises he already has a very well-thought-out wish in mind. Back in the forest, the MC rests panting against a tree after the crazy race for survival. Back in his human form, the young man grabs his head in total despair upon realizing the size of his problem. Sitting on the grass, he regrets leaving the heavy luggage behind during the wild escape. The boy rolls on the ground frustrated, complaining that he lost the most important item of his plan and his luck is awful. Lying on his back in the brush, the young man tries to organize his thoughts to find a quick fix for the crisis. Jumping up, he stands determined to retrace his steps, concluding that whining there will not fix a thing. Meanwhile, the injured assistant holds his hurt head and notices his master's return with relief. The warrior checks if the young man's dizziness has improved, getting a positive reply despite how bad the wound is. Admitting defeat, the old man confesses in shame that he lost the target and asks what the servant found there. The helper points to the giant camouflaged bag on the ground, explaining he found the abandoned item on the path. Checking the luggage's luxurious material, the injured man acts very confused by the fact it is filled with useless rocks. Right then, the prince shows up out of nowhere acting clueless and suggests it was just a sick joke. Walking toward the two calmly, the MC points to the ground, faking relief at seeing the backpack. The old veteran's eyes widen and he stutters as he instantly recognizes the seventh prince's presence there in the woods. Wasting no time, the commander and the assistant drop to their knees immediately to pay proper respects to royalty. The boy approaches calmly and states he was looking for exactly that bag lost in the forest. Changing his tone, the young man intimidatingly demands to know if the commoners dared to steal his property. Sweating cold at the accusation, the veteran denies the theft and swears he just found the object lying in the grass. The prince mocks the lame excuse, pointing out anyone would lie to avoid getting their hand chopped off for stealing. Ignoring the old man's vows of loyalty, the boy changes the subject and demands to know why the assistant is bleeding. Kneeling and completely terrified, the injured servant tries to shrink back to avoid contact with the oppressive noble. In a fast and violent move, the MC lunges straight at the helper who is still on the ground. Acting like a true tyrant, the prince grabs the injured man's hair tightly and pulls him up without an ounce of pity. The commander panics seeing the scene and tries to step in quickly to protect his subordinate. Giving off a dark aura, the reincarnated boy scolds the old man's attitude and calls the servant nothing but ill-mannered trash. Focused on piling on the pressure, the young man asks to borrow a sword from the duke, threatening to fix the commoner's head for good. The assistant goes into a state of total shock, shaking with terror at the impending cruelty of that monstrous boy. The commander lowers his head and begs for mercy, taking the blame and promising to punish the boy severely. Mentally, the MC praises the man's absurd loyalty, acting like a perfect imperial hound even under pressure. Staring down the old man's resolve, the young man figures his son will also grow up to be an obedient lackey. The image of a scared child flashes through the prince's mind as he evaluates how that tense situation is playing out. Changing his attitude suddenly, the young man lets go of the servant and announces he will trust the bag's safety to the duke. Handing over the heavy backpack, the tyrant orders with a killer look that the veteran guard the item even with his own life. The old warrior swallows hard, feeling the full weight of the threat behind that direct order from the royal family. Unable to refuse, the commander bows his head and swears total obedience to the seventh prince's glorious command. The boy waves goodbye over his shoulder, feeling his body get light from finally being free of the weight of those rocks. Walking back, he feels bad for the injured helper, but knows he had to act like garbage for the plan to work. Far away, the servant apologizes for the mess, while the duke tells him to be thankful his arms are still intact. Still kneeling, the helper recalls a crucial detail about the moment he took the rock to the head. The young man confesses to his master that the one who threw the stone at him was none other than the seventh prince himself. The veteran tells the boy to shut his mouth right then, revealing he had already noticed that upon seeing the noble up close. As he walks away, the MC remembers that in the novel the Duke only rebels the following year due to his son's tragic loss. To force the old man's rebellion to happen earlier, the MC concludes he needed to cause a much bigger trauma. His mind drifts back to the siblings' conversation, where the winner revealed he would ask to develop the temple area. At the time, the vile noble made it clear his true intention was to wipe out all the homeless people in that region. With the plans falling perfectly into place, the boy realizes the ex-commander's future is already sealed forever. The old combatant has no idea that the mass tragedy will be used as fuel for his great rebellion. The prince silently decrees that the Duke's betrayal against the Empire is a bloody fate impossible to avoid. Just above the trees, a glowing magical signal rips through the orange sky, announcing the end of the hunting tournament. Hiding in the bushes, the young man checks his surroundings carefully to ensure he was not followed by absolutely anyone. Walking toward the camp, he jokes about acting like a monster, before remembering that is exactly his role. Focused on the next step of the plan, the young man gets ready to act the exact moment the competition is officially closed. Suddenly, the first Princess Mental Aberrant appears smiling, and comments on the surprise of seeing the boy alone in the woods. The MC freezes in fear, unable to believe he ended up bumping into her of all people in such an isolated and dangerous place. He quickly bows, paying respect, but the blonde dismisses the formalities, reminding him they are family. The woman asks about his horse's whereabouts, forcing the boy to lie that he left the animal in the stable to get some fresh air. With a suspicious look, the princess cuts the friendly mood, saying coldly she cannot buy that lame excuse. Princess Mental firmly questions why the boy is lying straight to his own family's face. Keeping his cool, the MC fakes confusion and asks what on earth she means by that. The woman explains she found a black horse strolling through the forest, and her servants confirmed the animal was his. With zero remorse, she warns she had the mount put down, because livestock that disobeys royalty deserves only to be disposed of. At that, the boy drops to his knees, immediately apologizing for the shame of losing his own horse. The princess tells him to lift his head, remarking that looking like that it almost seems she is punishing her little brother. Changing her tone, the woman claims to be happy he came back safe, and offers a new mount if he needs one. Watching her walk away, the young man concludes that dealing with this sister is a nightmare because he cannot read her intentions. He finds her peaceful exit strange, and suspects the princess's famous ability doesn't work on him. Cutting the reflection short, the focus shifts straight to one of the tents set up in the camp. Inside, one of the servants backs up the lame story about the assistant tripping on a rock while hunting. The man remarks he has seen it all in that tournament, but it is the first time someone gets hurt that badly just falling on the ground. Asked about the recovery time, Duke Fetus checks the wound and orders at least 1 week of bed rest. The injured assistant grabs his coworker desperately, reminding him he needs to stay by his master's side for the whole competition. To put an end to the panic, the veteran tells the boy to focus on getting better, promising he will handle everything on his own. Sensing a golden opportunity, the assistant agrees right away and swears he will try his best to rest. The commander jokes about the unheard-of vacation, while the boy complains his dream was always to eat and fool around. Moved by the honesty, the old man promises to win the tournament and ask for the rights to a gold mine just for him. Later, the silence of the tent is broken only by the sound of someone snoring loudly near the candle. Completely out cold, the injured servant enjoys the forced rest without a single care in the world. Meanwhile, the warrior packs his things in the dark so as not to wake up his knocked-out partner. Hiding in the shadows, the seventh prince watches the scene and praises the imperial hound's coldness in ignoring real danger. Keeping the plan in mind, the MC notes that the duke's son will also grow up blindly serving the crown. Unable to catch any sleep, the veteran decides to step out of the tent to walk a bit and get some fresh air. Suddenly, the old warrior spots something bizarre catching his eye in the middle of the dark. Dumped near the trees, the massive bag full of rocks is waiting exactly where it had been left. Following the absurd order, he grabs the luggage straps, feeling all the useless weight of that punishment. Walking through the woods with the burden, the noble's mind wanders to an old memory with his own son. In the past, the commander took the kid to the temple to tell him about the savior who came down from the skies in the era of chaos. Little Flynn shows how smart he is, and quickly guesses his dad was talking about the legendary Sierra the Great. Standing before the imposing statue, the man explained that divine incarnation used his power to put an end to the wars. After unifying the world 1,000 years ago, the hero founded the empire and gave rise to the royal family they swore to protect. Touching the boy's shoulder, the proud father called the kid his greatest treasure with immense pride. Trusting the future, he asked his heir to follow in his footsteps and become a glorious sword serving the crown. Back in the reality of the forest, the old man grumbles tiredly, wanting to understand why he is carrying useless stones. Facing his own humiliation, the veteran wonders if he is doing it out of pure loyalty or genuine fear. Right then, the deep sound of the war horns rings through the early morning, catching the ex-commander completely by surprise. In the center of the camp, the nobles are shocked by the mountain of beasts taken down in a single night of hunting. The rumors confirm the heir massacred all the monsters in the region, using his absurd water magic. With overwhelming power, the firstborn sets an unbeatable record and ruins any chance of competition. Without any delay, he is declared the absolute winner of the tournament in the early hours of the day. The sovereign congratulates his son's crushing victory, getting a formal thank you in return. Following the ancient tradition, the emperor demands the champion declare his long-awaited wish in front of everyone. The crowd whispers eagerly, remembering the atrocities requested before and trying to guess the next cruelty. Pointing to the soldiers, the winner claims that homeless people are infesting the sacred temple area. Keeping up the elitist speech, the prince talks about the need to restore the ruined aesthetic of the place. Hearing the chatter from afar, the experienced Duke Fetus widens his eyes, struck by a terrible gut feeling. The terrifying vision of ruthless knights burning innocents invades the old warrior's mind immediately. Confirming the nightmare, the firstborn demands full authority to carry out a sweep on those people. The shock paralyses the veteran, who quickly recalls the tragic afternoon his son witnessed a massacre. The child's voice calling for his father echoes like a stab to the old soldier's heart. Guilty for teaching blind loyalty, the man grips his sword, cursing the submission that hurt his son. Without thinking about the consequences, the ex-commander steps forward, breaking all the court's rules of conduct. Pulling his blade slightly, the Duke mentally apologizes to his heir for the crazy stunt he is about to pull. Before making a move, a weak and scared voice pops up out of nowhere, grabbing the furious veteran's attention. Cutting the tension in the tent, the seventh prince shows up and calls for the servant who had just collapsed on the floor. The assistant tries to bow, but is told to move slowly because of the nasty head wound. Confused by the royalty's presence, the injured man thanks him for the advice about finding a doctor to get some medicine. Ignoring the doubts, the boy warns that the Duke is about to do something incredibly stupid at the ceremony. The young man turns pale instantly, realizing the extreme danger his powerful master just got himself into. Without losing his composure, the MC advises the helper to run as fast as possible to prevent a tragedy. Desperate, the servant pushes through the crowd of nobles, shouting apologies and forcing his way through. Reaching the front line, the young man completely loses his voice, seeing a truly unbelievable scene. Right in the middle of the main stage, the old Duke drops the backpack on the ground, challenging the emperor's authority. Annoyed by the interruption, the first prince glares at the veteran, demanding an explanation for such audacity. Facing the sovereign, the warrior gives a speech that his bloodline protected the empire with blood for 1,000 years. Throwing his name's weight around, the old man offers to take on the mission of dealing with the temple residents. On his knees, he begs the emperor to grant that order to him, leaving the hall in a suffocating silence. Surprising everyone, the firstborn recognizes the soldier's loyalty and agrees to transfer the request on the spot. However, the noble shows his cruel side and mocks the fact a loyal dog would try to block its owner's will. Summoning colossal magical aura, the heir makes it clear there is no mercy for anyone who crosses royalty. Consumed by rage, he accuses the old man of having gone crazy and decrees his immediate execution for high treason. Accepting his own fate, the commander says he will pay for the sin of interrupting with his own life. Watching the nightmare become a reality, the injured assistant screams in total despair, crying out for his master. Hidden in the crowd, the MC celebrates inside, seeing his rebellion plan blow up just like in the book. Far away from all that mess at the camp, a lonely traveler takes a break on his journey. Wearing a dark cloak to hide his identity, he crouches peacefully by the edge of a crystal-clear river. The young man takes advantage of the calm in that massive green plain to fill his canteen with some fresh water. Right then, he notices something weird happening with the current right before his eyes. Completely confused, the traveler stops what he was doing and watches the water churn in a totally abnormal way.